So I woke up this morning and I think the Remoaners have finally fucking lost it, because there was just a goldmine of absolute insanity this morning. So I thought I might just go through it. First, let's hear what St. Caroline of Lucas has to say about the EU.
Hi, my name is Shihab Khan. I am a reporter and political columnist here at The Independent. And joining us today in our offices is Caroline Lucas, the MP for Brighton Pavilion and the co-leader for the Green Party.
Only the farce that is the Green Party could have two co-leaders. I mean, only they could be so pathetic, first off, but also only they could have the religious, dogmatic uniformity of opinion required to pull such a thing off.
The Brexit campaign deliberately didn't set out what leave would look like.
Oh, I hate to break it to you, Caroline, in this hideous lecture, but the Leave campaign was never going to know the exact terms of Brexit. They couldn't possibly lay it out. Most of them weren't going to be in government, so how could they possibly campaign for government policy after the referendum? They would have no means of doing that. They weren't campaigning for elected office. But also they didn't know the negotiating positions of either side, so all they could do was speculate.
It's a million miles away from the Scottish referendum, where, whichever side you were on that debate, at least those in favour of independence set out what it would look like. The Brexit campaign never did.
Completely incomparable. The SNP, or the Independence campaign, were in the Scottish National Assembly. They basically had their own government in waiting. They could, to some extent, lay out plans for what independence would look like, because there was a very good chance they were going to be the elected government. The Leave campaign was composed of a wide variety of people, and a large number of them weren't going to be in government, so how would they know what it was going to look like?
You were an MEP for some time. There are accusations from people in the Vote Leave campaign who say that it's undemocratic. Brussels is run in an undemocratic fashion, that decisions are taken in Brussels that affect the UK. That's a strong reason why many people voted to leave.
Well, yes, it was, but you haven't explained it well at all.
They want to regain control. How do you go about addressing that if you're passionately remaining in the EU? The EU will continue on pushing for more integration. There's a lot of people in this country that don't want that.
I get the impression that this interviewer is a bit of a wet fish.
Well, I think there are quite a few assumptions in your question. The first one I would say is that it's not only the EU that is undemocratic. Yes, it is, we need to change it. But do you know not Westminster is pretty undemocratic as well?
So the UK has some flaws in its own democracy, so it's okay to accept unelected rulers in the EU.
And we've just seen that in the last few weeks when we've been discussing the trade bill. This is a new glossy bill from Liam Fox about how the UK is going to do trade policy outside of the EU.
Now, I didn't actually know a lot about this trade bill before I made this, but I looked into what her concerns were, and the bill itself is basically around the negotiation of trade deals after Brexit and what operations would have to take place. And her concern is that there won't have to be a parliamentary vote at the end of any trade deals negotiated, which I suppose on the face value of it is a valid concern, but that is very, very small fry when you compare it to the European Union and not being able to elect your own leaders and having a parliament which is absolutely and utterly impotent. But again, the faults of others do not excuse the faults of your own. Just because we have issues doesn't mean the European Union doesn't.
And it is far less democratic than the process we have within the EU right now.
You can't be serious!
Far less say for MPs, far less circulation of documents, far less input from democratically elected representatives.
Well, if you needed any proof that these people are religious and dogmatic in their defence of the European Union, there it is. How she can say that when she was an MEP herself for a number of years just baffles me. It must require an absolutely phenomenal amount of doublethink. Our Parliament has a direct connection to its constituents. A lot of people know who their MP is and can hold them accountable. Our Parliament can scrutinise legislation. Our Parliament can provide meaningful opposition and even block legislation if required. But the European Parliament can do none of that. It is a fundamentally pointless institution. But you can't see that because you are driven by dogma.
And just because we think Westminster is undemocratic, we don't then sort of turn our backs on it and say, well, we're not going to take part in it. You have to be in it to try to change it.
Yes, but our Parliament can be changed. We can elect a government that promises reform. We can pressure our MPs. We can lobby. We can do things to make meaningful change in our Parliament. The European Parliament does not have these powers. Even if it could reform itself somehow, we'd have to convince a large number of other European countries to go along with it, and that's just not a practical scenario.
So yes, there's plenty within the EU institutions, which is also not as democratic as it should be, and many of us as MEPs, Green Party MEPs, have been calling for greater transparency within the EU as well.
Not going to happen, I'm afraid. It's just not going to happen. But I'm afraid that's all I can take from Caroline Lucas today without having to drink a pint of bleach. But thankfully we have more to amuse us with, as my favourite Remoaner Conservative came out today with a statement, Anna Soubry. Let's have a look at what she had to say.
Labour's front bench itself is ideological. My front bench probably isn't, but it's in hop to 35 hard ideological.
So the Brexiteers in the Conservative Party are ideological, but Anna Soubry isn't, when a democratic vote wasn't enough for her to even budge on her opinion. Right.
Brexiteers who are not Tories.
No, of course not, Anna. They're heretics, aren't they? I mean, oh, fuck me. This woman is full of spite all the time. You can just tell it from the tone of her voice. I don't know how she gets up in the morning without spitting acid.
They're not the Tory party that I joined 40 years ago. And it's about time Theresa stood up to them and slung them out.
Purge the non-believers.
Because they've taken down Major, they took down Cameron, two great leaders, neither of whom stood up to them.
You see, there's a reason for that. In both cases, they couldn't, because the MPs that were pushing forward Eurosceptic ideas had such a groundswell of public support that to purge them from the party, like some sort of Stalinist regime, would cause such an anger amongst the public they would be condemned for it. That, my friend, is democracy.
Well, if it comes to it, I'm not going to stay in a party which is being taken over by the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and Boris Johnson.
Leave then. Go. To see you walk would be one of the best days of my life.